Good evening, everyone. Bonsoir. Welcome to the Rendezvous with Madness Festival, day number 2. My name is Scott Miller-Berry. I am Managing Director of Workman Arts, presenters of Rendezvous with Madness, and I'm a member of the Film Programming Committee. Welcome to the Q&A for the documentary The Silhouettes, featuring director Afsaneh Salari and moderated by filmmaker and film programmer Aisha Jamal. Rendezvous would like to acknowledge the indigenous lands on which we are presently located. Toronto comes from the Mohawk word Tukaranto, which can be translated loosely as where the trees meet the water. It is part of the traditional territories of many nations, the Huron-Wendat, the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Rendezvous and Workman Arts recognizes this is an ongoing dialogue, and an acknowledgement is simply that, just an acknowledgement. We are humbled and grateful to live and work on the land and share this territory with all people, those indigenous to Turtle Island and those from all over the world. Workman Arts values inclusivity, anti-oppression, and safety at all levels, and everyone has a role in maintaining this spirit. Please see our full statement and code of conduct on our website, workmanarts.com, and ensure that you are treating everyone with respect. We'd like to thank our co-presenters for The Silhouettes, the Canadian Newcomers and Immigration Association, and Toronto's Regent Park Film Festival, which is coming up next month, November 26th to 29th. Thanks to the director and producer of the short film, which did precede The Silhouettes, Stray Dogs Come Out at Night, Hamza Bangash and Mina Hussein. Some notes about asking questions during this Q&A tonight. If you would like to ask a question, you can type it into the chat box on the upper right on your screen. Our moderator will choose the questions for Afsaneh, and we do apologize in advance if we're not able to get to all the questions in the allotted time, which is approximately 30 to 45 minutes tonight. We do have an active listener who is joining us tonight. If you do need to step off of the call, you're welcome to text or call them if you would like someone to talk to. You can get in touch with Kat, who's right here on the screen. You can contact them directly at 647-474-2338 or by email at katrissing@gmail.com. Kat's contact information is also available on the Rendezvous webpage for The Silhouettes in the black box on the right. We deeply value making time to discuss difficult issues and content at Rendezvous with Madness, but also respect that you know your own limits and you'll seek out any supports that you might need. I'm now really excited to introduce Aisha Jamal, our moderator tonight, who will introduce tonight's Q&A. Aisha.
Thank you, Scott. And as Scott said, my name is Aisha Jamal. I'm a filmmaker and a film programmer. And it is my pleasure to be moderating today's discussion of The Silhouettes. And as Scott also said, we're going to start with a discussion between Afsaneh and I for about 10 to 15 minutes before we open it up to a Q&A. But you can enter your questions at any point into the chat box, which I believe is on the right of your screen. So hello, Afsaneh, and welcome. I know that you're zooming in from Paris and you stayed up late for us.
Hi, Aisha. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for organizing this Rendezvous with Madness. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining this conversation. I'm very happy to be here. It's almost midnight. No, it's actually past midnight, but I'm always very excited to talk about this film. So.
Yeah, it's a very beautiful film. And I wanted to start by asking you, because you feature an Afghan family in Iran in this film. And I wanted to ask how you met this family and what your connection to Iran is.
So for a long time, I knew I wanted to make a film about Afghan students, Afghan second generation. So first, I started getting to know a little bit of the community of the students in Tehran University. And it was through meeting somehow Afghan students who were almost my age, finding some friends between them, that I met Taghi, my protagonist. We discussed about the film project, and I wasn't necessarily supposed to make a film about a family. I was actually looking to make a film about a community of students, but then he introduced me to his family, and yeah, first time, first love. I was very interested in how they were, how the house was, with all the family dynamic and everything. So I somehow, I was shooting with other people as well. I had also other protagonists, but then at some point after maybe 1 or 2 months of shooting, I decided that I have to concentrate on this family, stay here, and I have a lot to somehow, to have for the film in terms of cinematography, location, the protagonist. So yeah, that's how actually we met. And my connection to Iran, yeah, I was born and raised in Iran, and I moved to France when I was 22 years old. I moved here to study. I did my bachelor in cinema in Iran, and for my master's studies, I came to Paris. I never thought I'm gonna stay. I still don't think I'm actually based in Paris. I don't consider myself like someone who's based here. I don't see myself getting old here. So my connection to Iran is very strong. And I think that's probably the reason I made this film as well. Because when I came here, it was through living here and through like seeing myself as a second citizen, and like receiving some questions about basic questions about who you are and and where you come from. Questions that you do not necessarily are asked. You're not necessarily asked when you're in your home country, because you're very privileged of being. Although as a woman in Iran, you're not necessarily very privileged, but still, there were like some issues that were very new to me, and these issues somehow drew my attention to actually 2 million Afghan living back in my home country, people who are very invisible in our society and like very silhouette, like it's as if there's no story, as if there's no color. And so this perspective and this immigration story of my own made me somehow sensitive to what's happening with Afghans in Iran.
So what were some of the themes or ideas that you wanted to explore once you met the family?
From the beginning, for me, it was very important to shed light both on the fact that Afghans in Iran, they live quite in a very discriminatory situation. And this is something that Iranians are not aware. They do not know many of the issues that we talk about in the film. They do not know that Afghans, they can't work based on their qualifications. They do not know that Afghans, they cannot travel without permission. These questions are not spoken, and no one really know about these things. And so I thought that it's important to bring up these issues and talk about them. But it was also very important for me to represent also this community through these faces and through all these stories that we can all somehow relate to. It's a family story, and all the pain, love, fear, hopes, everything the family goes through, we can all identify with. Tariq's mother could be my own mother when I first moved to France, or his father or his siblings. So all these emotions are of very universal value. And I think that's the thing we lack when we are racist, that we cannot actually see all these shared human emotions, which are very basic as well. It's just that the otherness is something for us empty of all these emotions, right? So I knew that I want to have that as well from the very beginning, that yes, there are these issues we want to talk about, but let's look at this issue from this window, the window that we all know this frame of a family, of all these emotions, of all this pain and suffering. Maybe not the same level, but these are very human.
Yeah, that's the nice thing about the film, is that they're very specific themes, but also very universal themes. So there's so many ways to sort of hook into your film. I also wanted to ask you, you focus on the youngest member of the family and his struggle to find a job after graduating and perhaps returning to Afghanistan, and he considers does and does it. In what ways is his situation similar to other Afghans his age in Iran?
Well, I think there are many second generation Afghans who go more or less through the same question. It's not that all of them, they manage to go to university or that they have qualifications. It's not that the question of work and where's my position in the society is necessarily valid to everyone. But the second generation is born in Iran. It's supposed to be their home country as well. They've never seen Afghanistan. They do not have the same feelings or the same issues as their parent used to have when they first came to Iran. So their issues are very different as a second generation. they are in Iran, they are safe, and they have some very valid requests. But probably for their parents who fled to Iran and they saw war, like Tariq's parent, this can be already okay, which I think is not for many of them neither, because they've been also through different, very difficult periods as well, until they get this ceiling and they provide their family with this very safe life. So I think the question of identity, the question of where is my position in this society, the question of why I do not have some basics as a citizen is quite valid for the second generation, for everyone, no matter if they study or not.
I wanted to remind the audience that if you have a question, please put it in the chat box and we will be able to take the questions. I see that there's going to be a question that's popping up any minute, but while we wait for it, I wanted to ask you, in the film several times, you know, the family talks about being Hazara, which is a very specific ethnic group from Afghanistan. Does that add an extra layer of their experience in Iran?
I don't know about necessarily if it adds something about being in Iran or in general, because Hazaras, they have like a history of being persecuted as well in Afghanistan. And the incident that happened in the film is specific also to Hazaras, right? That's a sheet, that's a demonstration that happens for Hazaras during the light movement. But the thing is, I think there's a very basic thing, which is Hazaras, they look different. And so as soon as you see a Hazara Afghan in Iran, you know that it's an Afghan. So you can quickly like be very racist to them or like have all these cliches around. Whereas if it's an Afghan from other ethnies, the fact that they do not look different, they can look like an Iranian, they already passed, you know, somehow. So I think that, yeah, that adds somehow in a very, very basic level that you look different very quickly. So you're faced with some prejudices.
Yeah, it was interesting to hear that in the film several times. I have a question from an audience member who asks, what were the biggest challenges of filming Taghi and his family?
I think to get to it was more than like the let's say like the shooting itself and like finding a certain dynamic, because it went quite quickly. It was very easy. I was really I had this opportunity of being given an unlimited amount of generosity to spend hours there and be really given everything I wanted. That does not necessarily happen with every documentary and with every protagonist. It was very quick. And I can say that's not because that they did trust me from the beginning. I think that's something very cultural. I would like to say that. It's not necessarily the answer to the question, but I would like to say that in that culture in Iran, Afghanistan, the countries around, as soon as you enter someone's house, you're their guest. And as soon as you're their guest, you're very respected and they are very generous toward you. So Afsaneh, before being a filmmaker, I was their guest, and they somehow provided me with all this generosity and warmth and even food and everything, and even a good place to sleep sometimes, because I was their guest. So it went very well in terms of that dynamic. And of course, little by little, they did trust me as well, because I shared a lot with them about my own experience and everything. But then the biggest challenge for me as a filmmaker was how to create this narrative and how to create the narrative arc. And it was difficult, especially once Taghi is back from Kabul, because he was really depressed for a long time, for a year or two. And it was difficult really to bring that out and to make something around it in the film, you know, visually or in terms of the narrative arc. So I had a lot of writing with my producer. We had to do a lot of writing, a lot of discussion. Also during the edit, we had to really come up with some ideas that could sustain the narrative in a way it should, because it has this like classic arc. It has this classic way of storytelling. That was very challenging for me, but I had a very good editor at the same time. So I think he saved some part of it.
We have another question asking, do you think people in Iran are now becoming more aware of discrimination against Afghan refugee, or is it still being ignored?
I think like recently, there has been quite some good initiatives that, like, in my generation especially, which is a generation who also lives abroad, and like there are many young Iranians who are immigrants themselves, that they are also faced with similar questions, and they try to bring it back to Iran and raise awareness through social media, through campaigning, through NGOs. So it's optimistic to see all these efforts being made, but still, I think we have a long way to go.
Mm-hmm. You touched a little bit on the mental health, and I wanted to ask you if you could maybe elaborate from your own observation of this family and some of the extended members of this family. What impact does it have on the members of this family to be living in such a discriminatory environment?
That was actually very interesting for me to see how they cope with the whole situation, because I felt this house they've built and this border they've created between this inside environment and what's outside is actually what's somehow saving them, what's actually helping them to cope with the whole situation and the whole dynamic they have between them. This collective, this sense of collectivity that they have, the support they give to each other. Of course, there's a hierarchy, like you have the father on the very top, and it's like, it can be very male dominated, like the whole dynamic. But still, I think the father and the mother, like the parents, they managed to create a very, very safe environment for everyone emotionally, that I think it has a very, very impact on their mental health. Like the kids, until they're at home, before going to school, they are princess. Like they receive all the love and affection a kid needs. So they're very healthy. They do not really know what Iranian or Afghan is until they go to school and they're pointed out, your nose look Afghan, you know, because they receive everything they need as a human being in those years, you know. But then even as I grow up and I could see with Taghi or with Zahra, they still, I think the fact that they're very supported by their big family helps them to cope with what's outside the border of that house, that very safe and very loving environment that they live in.
I also love the style that you use to tell the story. You know, you have sort of longer shots, you use quite a static camera. Can you talk a little bit about why you chose to make the film the way that you did?
I think part of it is because, well, I've always been very much into observational cinema. And for a long time, I did not know that I'm going to use Taghi's diaries. I discovered them later, and I realized that, with my producer, we decided we want to use this because he's a quite introvert person. So let's add this, and this will add a very interesting layer to the film. I've been into observation before, but also the family itself and the way they connect to each other is sometimes very unspoken, let's say. It's very non-verbal. It's all through acts. It's through food. It's through bringing tea to each other. It's through playing around with children. You do not necessarily address directly everything. Yes, the father does. He does address. He's very vocal about what he needs. But others, they're like, and I felt like there's something happening between them, which I can only capture if I give enough time to it and to them, you know. There's just something in this environment which is very unspoken. And you have to really observe that to have that happen. Like many documentaries in general, when you observe protagonists, you have to be very patient with the situation anyway. But I felt with them, it's even more, because many things go through metaphors. Like you say something, who is going to make tea for you in Kabul? And that's all. I mean, she's not going to tell him, I'm going to miss you. You have to come back. No, it's just through all these simple gestures and this one dialogue that the mother says, you know, this act of pouring the eardrop in his ear, which is very motherly. And so I think that their dynamic also inspired me to follow their rhythm and their subtlety and their delicacy, the way they show their love to each other.
That's beautiful. And it's funny because this question was exactly one that an audience member put in, which was the question about aesthetics and silence. And we just answered it. But there's another question that asks, has the family seen the film? Yeah. And what do they think?
Yeah, it was, I get very emotional when I talk about it because it was a very, very interesting experience. Well, of course, during the shooting, we had a lot of moments that the mother would come to me and be like, but you've been filming me for like an hour praying and doing this. What are you going to do with all these images? And then once they saw the film, she was like, now I know. So now I recall these moments. But no, in general, I think they liked it. The father was very touched. He told me that I made a beautiful souvenir of the 3 years of his life. And yeah, I think they were very touched. We had a very, very emotional screening, and I think they were happy with the film.
I wanted to ask you, in the making of this film, was there anything that really surprised you that you learned about either the family or about Afghans in Iran?
I think it was, yeah, about the family and the family dynamic. I think that's something, in the end, I realized when I was finishing the edit, I had a moment with my editor, I started crying because I was very touched, and I realized I actually know why I made this film. And I was very, very touched by that. And I was like, it's actually the whole thing around the family and the whole thing around support, because I live far from my family. I have many friends myself, but still, I think what really lacks for me is the fact that, you know, if something happens, your mother is not there, your sisters are not there, your brother is not there. And I'm also raised in a big family. We are 5 kids. I have a lot of nieces as well, nephews. We do not probably have the very same structure as Tari's family, but it's more or less the same vibe. And that's something that I really, I miss. And I feel sometimes this is the basis of having a very healthy life as well for me, to be close to people that I love. And I could realize how, like, the fact that Tari wanted to somehow go to Afghanistan and build his life and everything was important to him, the way it was important for me when I moved to France, of course. But still, I could also feel all this lingering, all these moments of hesitation, all this nostalgia arising in him and also in his family. So that's actually something that touched me, that I realized why I've been making actually this film, because I think in the end, that's what saves us. Not necessarily being in a family, but being in a community, having a collective, having people who love you and who support you no matter what. That's what keep us safe and give us a mental health. Yeah, which I think also that's the reason why when we go abroad, we want to make community as well, and we want to grow community.
Yeah, it's very beautifully put. We have another question from an audience member who's asking you, do you know how his family, how he's doing right now? And is he still in Afghanistan?
He just went back to Iran. Like after, it's going to be 2 years soon. So I don't know if I'm allowed to say this or not, but he was chosen as a like elite member of Afghan immigrant community in Iran. And there's a new law that gives the elite members of Afghan immigrant community to work. And so, there are like maybe 5 people chosen this year. It's the first time. Wow. And so he went back to Iran. Now I think he's doing some job interviews. But at the same time, I know that he's applying for PhD. Like he has this parallel plan as well, probably to go to Europe to study, to do his thesis, to do a PhD. But he was in Afghanistan for 1.5 years. And I think at some point he really had some troubles wanting to stay. It was mentally very pressuring.
It's interesting that you say he's one of 5 people chosen, and it makes me think about the fact that, number one, that's a very low number. And number 2, what do you think needs to change in Iran for Afghans to thrive more? Because, you know, it is sad in the film at moments to hear them talk about how many blocks there are. For example, we hear one of the young girls who's 8 years old is asked to leave school and to go to an Afghan-only school. She cannot stay in the Iranian school. What changes do you think are needed to actually allow Afghans to thrive in this place?
Well, I think many. I think many, and we can start from the basics, which is to have the freedom to travel without having to prove why you want to travel. to have the freedom to work based on your qualification. If you're given the right to study at university, then why not given the right to work as well? Well, I know that the situation has not been like this before. Like the regulation has changed in Iran. In the beginning, it wasn't like this. And it's also due to problems in Iran as well. It's a country under very, very heavy sanctions. So, and right now, as we were talking, we are like in a very big economic crisis as well. Our money is like devaluating like this. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable what people are going through in terms of economy. But I think, for example, as an Afghan who go to university, if you're given this opportunity to study and to grow and to really pursue your passion, then why not given the opportunity to give back to the society that has given this to you? So I think it's very logical. If you've studied in that university, then you can also work there and contribute to that society. So I think there are some basics that could change. But there has been also efforts, especially for the schools, for example, for given like the unconditional right to children to go to schools. Or like, for me, it's, as you say, it's a very low number, but it brings a very, very tiny ray of hope as well, that it may change. And to be able to discuss about this openly, which is, as I said in the beginning, starting somehow, especially through social media and campaigning.
And then I want to ask you about Zahra in the film, because at the end it tells us that she's going to go to medical school. So if she goes to medical school in Iran, will she be able to work there, or is the assumption that she'll return to Afghanistan just like her brother?
Well, as far as I know, she can't for the same reason. But I've heard, like I was in Iran 2 months ago, I've heard that there can be exceptions as well. So that's why I can't really tell. But she has plans to go to Europe anyway. She already has this, and because I'm in touch with her now, I know that she doesn't want to go to Afghanistan. And I don't think, in the beginning when I was shooting the film, when Taghi was going, they both had this dream of going there. Taghi goes and he prepares the ground, and then she joins. But then I think the reality Taghi faced with was quite different than what they had built before. So the plan has changed, and I think she may go to Europe, and the family already knows, and they are preparing somehow for this. Because she's a very brilliant student. I mean, it's very difficult to go to medical school in Iran. It's a very, very difficult exam.
Right. Yeah. That's interesting. You touched a little bit on the idea of the title, which is The Silhouettes. And I really love that title. Can you tell us a little bit about why you chose to call the film this?
Yeah, and it came very early on, as I was, even before meeting the family, because I realized myself, when I got curious about the Afghan community and Afghan students, I realized to what extent I've been ignorant and I didn't know anything about this community. And they are like, at the time, they were around 2.5 million people. It's a very big number. Iran used to be one of the countries that has the biggest number of immigrants in the world before the 2015 crisis. And still, I personally didn't know anything about them. And it's as if like you have these people, you see them, but they are silhouettes. They have no story. They have nothing interesting. And it's all cliches. You think you know everything about them. And that's the cliche of Afghans being only manual laborers, not going to school, being always like skilled, like manual laborers. That's all. I mean, we didn't, like Iranians, some of them do not even know that Afghans go to university. There's a very big community of students, for example, very, very brilliant. That's why at first place, I got curious about the student community, because I also didn't know that this big community exists. So I think that's something that came from me, that I've been seeing them as silhouettes as well, which is not valid. And let's see what's real and what's behind.
Have you had a chance to show your film in Iran, and have you gotten any response from Iranians to your film?
I haven't shown it yet, but I really look forward to. I just submitted it to the big documentary festival we have, Cinema Verite. So I look forward for it to be selected. But this year it's going to go online, so it may not necessarily have the same reception as other years. But I would love to show it there. I mean, that's the very, very prior target audience for Iranians, first of all. Yeah.
Right, makes sense. I have a question from the audience which asks, are Afghan refugees facing more discrimination now due to COVID-19, especially when it comes to traveling? Are there less supports for them during the pandemic?
Well, anyway, Iran did not really put any special regulation during the pandemic because we are in a very difficult economic situation now. They could not really close down anything. So I think they've been touched anyway by the pandemic as well, because they are a more vulnerable community as well when it comes to going to work and everything. I mean, some of us also in Europe, for example, have the privilege to stay home and take care of ourselves, but the delivery guy who works for Amazon still has to work. So I think that's the same also for example, Afghan laborers in Iran. But in terms of traveling, no, I think the regulations remain the same as it was before, as far as I know.
Yeah, so the border between the two countries has not been closed.
If that was the question, I thought it's within the country. I don't know. I can't say.
Okay. Now there's another question asking, are you working on another film?
Yeah.
Did you want to talk about it a little bit?
Yeah, I would love to. I'm working now on another documentary here, which is also about a father and son. It's about a painter and his son, which is a musician, and a very, very marvelous universe that they've created together as two artists, father and son, which is for me the same vibe. The mother as well, but she's very shy. She doesn't want to appear in the film for now, but we've just started shooting. I think she will. For me, it's again the same dynamic between them, and because the father also his father was an immigrant from Iran, and everything that he has from his past and the identity he has. But I think again the family, the relationship between family members has a central role in this film as well.
Is it an Iranian family?
So they are like, yeah, the father is like half Iranian, but they're very French now.
Okay. We have another question from the audience that's kind of following up on the idea of Zahra coming to Europe after she does her medical degree. And the question is, how will she be treated in Europe or in France in particular? I guess it's guessing at how Afghan refugees or Afghan medical doctors would be treated in Europe.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, she won't be a refugee. I think she will come to continue to pursue her studies.
Right.
I think that's already differentiated because already the label refugees again bring a lot of prejudices as well, and the way we, like the refugees are treated in the society, it's again different than if you come to study. You know, again, some prejudices are attached to it as well, but I think the same, not the same, but well, like the regulations may be different, laws may be different, but again, living in another country, you're still second citizen. You still have this a little bit darker skin. You still look different. You still look Iranian. You still look Afghan. Yes, we're more progressist. We may look less racist, but I think some very basic feeling and basic question may remain there. I'm telling this based on my own experience, my own lived experience. I hope she won't have the same experience,
right?
But I'm not necessarily sure that it's gonna be heaven and it's gonna be
hard. Yeah.
And
it's tough to be away from a family that is so close.
Yeah, again,
Now we're almost out of time, but I wanted to ask you, what did you want people to take away or think about after watching your film?
Wow. I actually want people to tell me what they take away from it. Because I've been showing this film online so far with almost no feedback. I mean, very, very little. And I don't really know what people really think about it. But I think, like the very simple like acknowledgement of this family and many families like them around the world, because every society has its own second citizen community. Every society has people who are always discriminated by one way or another, not just like systematically, but in the way they're treated. I think just to have like I don't want to change the look. I think that's a very big wish to have, but just to see that yeah, we can sometimes just have a little bit broader view on things and detach ourselves from the cliches and see a little bit of the humanity behind that community as well.
Yeah, that's a nice way to put it too. Well, thank you so much, Afsaneh, for your very generous answers to our questions. I wanted to also encourage everyone to check out the Silhouettes as it makes its rounds through all the different festivals if you didn't get a chance to see it here. And I will invite Scott to come back, who has a few parting words to say.
Hello, everyone. I just want to thank Afsaneh Salari, the director of the Silhouettes, as well as Aisha Jamal, our moderator, for your time tonight and your generous thoughts, reflections, and responses. Thank you so much for sharing the Silhouettes with Rendezvous with Madness, both in Toronto and Canada and beyond. I want to remind everyone, thank you so much for tuning in to this discussion. The festival continues for 8 more days, and we have a lot of online films, workshops, panels, and performances, and everything is free or pay what you can. Everything that's live has ASL interpretation. Thank you to Joanne tonight. And it has live captioning. Thank you to Chris tonight. And it has a virtual supportive listener. Thank you to Kat tonight. So thank you again for your time and wishing you a wonderful evening.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Take care. Offline.
Have a good night.
Thanks, Joanne. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Take care.